Welcome! Today we're going to be taking a look at Through the Ages, a new story of civilization. This is a 2 to 4 player civilization building game where you are trying to build the best civilization over time. How do we do that? By using resources, drafting cards, spending actions, and bidding on territory. The goal of this game is to be the civilization with the most culture points after age 3. Now, if it's your first time playing this game, they do suggest ending after age 2. Now that we know what the winning conditions are, let's go ahead and take a look at the game components, setup, and what a round looks like in Through the Ages. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the components for Through the Ages. We're going to be starting with the main game boards. At the very top is the science track. This track is split into 2. The top part is your science points, which can be spent in a round for research. And the bottom track is your science rating. That will let you know how much your science is going to increase at the end of your turn. Next is the culture track in yellow. And the top of the culture track lets you know how many culture points you have at the moment. And then the bottom is the culture rating, which will be how much your culture will increase at the end of your turn. Then we have the current age board to the right, and that will be where you will draw your civil cards and your military cards. Then we have the card row below that, which will be where you spend your civil actions to pay for any of the civil cards. Next is the military board. The military board shows your strength, and then it has a spot for common tactics in the center, which you would mark with your common tactics tokens. And at the very bottom is your event decks. So these are the ones that would happen eventually. The ones in the middle could happen any round, and then to the right are past events. Next we have the player boards. First thing to notice on your player board is the government spot that's already printed on there. This can be replaced during the game, but it lets you know how many civil actions and military actions you can take on your turn. Next, across the top, you have military. This will allow you to build warriors at a cost of 2 stone. Then you have your agriculture or your farms, which you can build for 2 stone and will produce 1 food each. Then you have your bronze, which is your mine, and it will produce 1 stone. And then you can build more mines for 2 stones each. Next you have your philosophy, which will cost you 3 stones and will gain you 1 in your science rating. And lastly, we have the religion, which you don't have any in the beginning, but will give you 1 on your culture rating, 1 on your happiness, for a cost of 3 stones each. Throughout the game, you will be upgrading these places as well as your government. So these are the ones that are printed on the board and are available at the very beginning of the game. In the middle of your player board, you're going to notice the end of turn sequence. And then below the end of turn sequence, you will see your resource pool in blue, your unused workers to the right, and then your yellow bank or your worker bank at the very bottom. You'll also notice the smiley face, which is your happiness marker. Now let's quickly look at the types of tokens that you see on the player board. The yellow are your worker tokens, the blue are your resource tokens, like stone and food, and then on your government spot are your white and red tokens. The white tokens represent the number of civil actions you can take during your turn, and the red are the number of military actions you can take during your turn. The last components we're going to be taking a look at are the cards. Let's start by looking at the civil cards. The different types of civil cards that you're going to see are wonder cards, action cards, leader cards, and then as you go along to age 1 and 2, you will see advances for military. You will see advances for farms or mines. You will see buildings. And then you will also see governments. Now let's look at the military cards. You'll notice that you will not have any military cards in Age A. They will start in Age 1. And the types of cards you're going to see are military bonus cards, military tactics cards, event cards that will eventually go to our event deck spot, agreement cards, aggression cards, and then lastly you will notice war cards. Now, in setting up a game of Through the Ages, you're going to start by putting out your tokens. The tokens should go on the science point at 0 and the science rating at 1. This is because you have one philosophy. For the culture tokens, you're going to put them at 0 and 0. And for the military token, you're going to put it at 1 because you have one warrior. Next, you're going to line up your cards for Age A so that we can begin the first turn. And then you're also going to set up your game board exactly like you see. Now, if you are playing a 2-player game, then each one of your Age decks, you'll need to remove the 3+ and the 4-player cards, which are in the upper right corner. And then when you're starting your first turn of the game, the first player is only allowed to use 1 civil action, and the second player is only allowed to use 2. And then if you have 3, they can use the third action, and then if you had the 4th player, you could use all 4 actions on that turn. Now let's go through what a turn looks like. At the start of every turn, you're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to replenish the card row. So based off the number of players, you're going to remove the front cards. You're going to slide all the cards to the left. And then on the rightmost side, you're going to fill in cards. The next thing is resolve a war if one was declared in the previous round. And the last one is to make tactics that you had and used available on the tactics spot. Next, we have the politics phase. During the politics phase, you can prepare an event, meaning you can take one of your green cards and place it face down on the future event, and then flip over the top of the current event stack. Now, after you do that, you are going to go through and resolve what it says on the card. If the card was a territory, then players would then begin bidding for that territory using their troops and any military bonus cards that they have. Also, during the politics phase, if you don't have an event that you want to use, you can play an aggression card, you can play a declare war card, or you can play an agreement card. And then lastly, you can choose to cancel an agreement, or if you feel like you have no hope in the game, you can resign. Next is the action phase for a turn. This is where you're going to be spending your civil actions and your military actions. For your civil actions, or your white tokens, you can do one of the following. You can take a card from the card row and paying the action cost underneath that card. You can increase your population, moving a token from the yellow bank and paying the food cost. You can build a farm, mine, or urban building, which will allow you to produce more culture, science, stone, or food. You can also destroy a farm, mine, or urban building. Move a yellow token from that particular card back to the worker pool. You can play a leader card, which are the green cards. You can build a stage of a wonder, which are the purple cards. You can develop a technology. This is any card with the science in the top left corner, and you would simply pay the science cost. You can declare a revolution, meaning that you don't quite have the larger number of science in the top left corner of a government card. So you would spend all of your civil actions that turn and pay the lower of the two science cost. Then you can also play an action card. Now, action cards cannot be played the same turn that they were taken from the card row, but you can play them on subsequent turns. Next is the military actions that you can take. You can build a military unit. You could upgrade a military unit. You could disband a military unit. Or you could play a tactic card. Now, at the end of every turn, these tactic cards will go from your player board to the common area. And then lastly, you can spend 2 of your military actions to place your token on someone else's common tactic. Once you've completed all of your actions for that round, then we will go into the end of turn sequence you see in the middle of your player board. Starting the end of turn sequence, first you discard excess military cards. You can only have in your hand as many military cards as you have red military action cubes. Second thing you do is you score for science and culture. So at the beginning of the game, you are at +1. So after your turn, you would move the science 1. And then if you had any culture, you could move the culture track. Next, you check for corruption. Corruption is found in the blue resource spot. If you are hoarding resources, then you will start seeing penalties in the resource spot. Those you would pay before moving on to the next part. Then you would produce food based on the number of workers and based on the number of food they produce. Then you would pay your food consumption, which based on the number of workers that you've brought out, you would end up paying the highest food consumption that you have. And then the last thing is to produce resources based on your mines. So you would get 1 resource per worker per mine type. And then we are ready to reset our actions and get ready for the next player's turn and subsequently our next turn coming up in the next round. There are a couple of things that we didn't discuss during this turn, and that is, what if you finish out one of your rows of workers? If that's the case, then you have to have a happiness of 1 if you finish the first 2 workers. If you don't have that happiness rating increase, you would have to use one of your unused workers to cover that spot. If at any time the number of unused workers that you have in the worker pool is less than the number of workers that you're using down here on your happiness spots, then you would have an uprising in which you would not produce resources for that round or the subsequent rounds until you get your happiness to increase to the point where your discontent workers are less than your unused workers. That concludes the turn of this game, and so turns would continue going. When all of the current age cards have been placed, you would start a new age. When going from age A to age 1, nothing happens, but the cards do come up on the current age board. After age 1 is finished, then you would get rid of any cards in your hand from age A. You would get rid of any leaders you have from age A, and you would get rid of any unfinished wonders from age A. You would also get rid of any packs from age A, and finally, you would get rid of 2 of your yellow workers. The same thing would happen at the end of age 2 for any of your age 1 pieces. This would continue on until the very end of age 3, or if this is your first game, age 2, and then we would reach the final scoring. At the end of the game, if this is your first game, there's a detailed list of scoring that would take into account each player's civilizations and your science ratings. But if you've played this game before, then at the end of the game, you would simply resolve all of the current and future event cards. And then whoever has the most culture is considered the most successful civilization and wins the game.